Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast, I Guess Some Things I'll Never Know. And this came up for me today when I was listening to Spotify. I heard the song by an artist, Teddy Swims, and the name of the song was Some Things I'll Never Know. And there were a few lyrics in there that actually made me shed a tear. Did I turn over every stone? Am I still there when your eyes close? When did your heart let me go? I guess some things I'll never know. And the reason why those lyrics felt so tender to me is I started to think about all the things in life we have to live with that we don't get to know. We don't always know why a friend or a partner or a spouse ends a relationship. We don't always know exactly why we lost a job. We don't always know exactly why certain things happen. And in order to move on with our lives, we have to get comfortable with not knowing. We have to get comfortable moving on, not feeling totally settled about the situation, not fully understanding it, but having to make a choice to hold a pain that never goes away, to hold a pain that holds you back, to constantly be thinking about something in the past, or decide to let it go, to be free, and to let it go, to move forward, and to let it go, to create a new life. And there were so many things in my life that I didn't have a full understanding of. And the biggest thing, which I talk about often, is when my husband left me about 5.5 years ago. All I knew was that he told me he wanted to date other people. Although that was something he kept saying he wanted to do, I didn't understand how a 27-year-old marriage and a 29-year-old relationship was just ending like that. I never got to understand what happened in our relationship. I never got to understand why we couldn't work on it. I never got to understand so much. All I knew is that he told me that he wanted to leave, and 6 weeks later, he was gone. And he left without me fully understanding what had happened. And of course, in the beginning, there was a lot of crying, and we had to deal with money and our children. And not once did I get to have that conversation to understand what had happened. And every night I'd lay awake trying to figure it out, trying to know what I couldn't know, trying to think, was there something I missed, trying to understand what I did wrong. And that's a path that if you go down, it is a bottomless pit. And of course, when things end abruptly, of course, when we are disappointed, we're going to have that experience. But if we continue to ask ourselves these questions day after day, the heartbreak that we feel could never heal. And so I kept trying to figure it out. And of course, I looked at my role in the relationship because that's something that I could take responsibility for. But there's so much that I could never know. And there came a time after I processed the pain, there came a time I started to heal, that I had a choice that either I was going to hold the story that I needed to know and keep asking the questions and keep going back to the past, or I was going to allow myself to put down the things that I will never know. And that is what I chose to do. And I so understand how hard this is. And I know people listening to my podcast, you might be in a situation right now or in your past that has broken your heart, that has disappointed you, that has caused you so much pain, and you don't understand why. You don't understand why that person acted that way towards you. You don't understand why the situation happened. You just want to know. And you believe that if you know, you will find peace. And whether that is true or not, there's something about life we don't always get to tie up loose ends. In every moment, in every day, and every week, and every month, and every year, we have to make a choice. Do we hold on to the past and do we ask those questions? Or do we go within and look at ourselves and look at our experience and be there for ourselves and bet on ourselves and come back to the moment, nurture ourselves, heal our heart, and get back into the world and try again? Because there are certain things that we can never know. Did I turn over every stone? Am I still there when your eyes close? When did your heart let me go? I guess some things I'll never know. So how can we do this? How can we find peace with what we don't know? How can we move on when we don't know? And how can we use not knowing to help us create a new life? And like I always say on every podcast, we have to allow ourselves to feel the pain of not knowing, the pain of disappointment, the pain of heartbreak, the pain of when something happens that really breaks us, that hurts us, that devastates us. We need to ask those questions, because without the questions, we cannot come to terms with what we could never know. But at the same time, while that's happening, we have to be really aware that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to constantly nurture ourselves, and we need to know that whatever happens to us in the outside world does not change our value of who we are. That we still have a right to be here. We still have a right to find our way. We still have a right to love again. We still have a right to choose. And it's very delicate when you're going through that pain to know that. But knowing that we are worthy and that we have value is one of the most important things. And as you're moving forward, as you're healing, you get to this point where you realize that you've asked that question so many times. Why did this happen? What were they thinking? What did I do? But all that's happening is it is bouncing against the wall and falling to the ground. And when you hit that point where the answers are not coming, when you hit that point that your pain has no answers, when you hit that point that your heart wants to heal, that's the moment where you have to start putting it down. That's the moment where you have to see that it is beyond you. It is a question that cannot be answered. And in that moment, you have a choice. I remember the day when I realized that if I didn't let this go, that if I kept these questions going, I wouldn't have the space and the strength and the resilience to ask more elevated questions. And those elevated questions had to do with what kind of life was I going to create for myself in this moment? If I let it go, what resources did I have to move forward? What kind of future did I want? And then I was able to realize that this is where not knowing was going to serve me. Because if I didn't know what was going to happen next, that meant that all things were possible. So ask yourself these questions. Allow yourself to think about how many times a day or how long you've held on to things from the past and nothing ever changes. The questions don't get answered. All it does is bring back the heartache. All it does is bring back the stress, the anxiety, the worry, feeling bad about yourself. Realize that it's a loop that you keep playing and you could just put it down. And then you could look at what you don't know and use it to your advantage. Because if you can't know everything, if you can't know everything from your past, if you can't answer every question, that means that you can't know what your future will be. And that means that everything you could possibly want in your life, all your dreams, all your goals, because you don't know what's going to happen next, all possibilities exist. You are in a field of unlimited possibilities. You can't know what will happen next, so you can fall in love again. You can get a better job. You could totally change your life because you don't know the future. So not knowing has its benefits. Because we can't know everything, we could change everything. We can grow, we can let go, and we could experience joy and greatness and all the things that make us feel alive. But in order to do that, we have to be willing to make space within us, space to dream, space to create new things, space for new relationships. And the only way we could make space is if we stop fixating and obsessing and holding on to the things of the past, to the questions that cannot be answered, for the heartache that stays alive because it thinks if it knew it would feel better. And knowing doesn't solve the problem. What solves the problem is when we choose ourselves. What solves the problem is when we bet on ourselves, when we embrace ourselves, when we heal and we know that uncertainty is our best friend, because that means new, beautiful things could happen in our lives. We can heal. That's a beautiful thing that happens in the unknown future. We could dream. We could love again. And we don't need to know everything. We don't need to turn over every stone to be okay. We need to let go and let go and let go. So there's enough space in our heart to let all the good in, all the kindness in, let our dreams in, and let our bright future start to take hold. Because for all you know, maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe, A Year Without Men, Maybe Everything's Okay, A Parenting Guide to Less Stress and Worry, they're available at all major bookstores and online retailers. And if you'd like to buy my Maybe cards or my digital Maybe journal, you could find them on Amazon, Etsy, or my Stan store. And most of all, if you like this podcast, I hope you subscribe and leave a comment.